All right, so we love to really dig into these reports you guys send us, and today we've got one on Uranium Energy Corp,
UEC.
UEC, that's right.
Yeah.
And in the next few minutes, we're going to break this down, give you all the key insights so you can really understand where they stand, their potential, what we can see from all this data.
Exactly.
We've got quite a bit to get through. We've got stock data company details, all the financial stuff, analyst opinions, and even some recent news.
Sounds good.
So let's jump right in.
Yeah, let's do it. This is a pretty dense report, so we'll try to boil it down to the need to know stuff for you.
Okay, perfect.
So starting with the basics, Uranium Energy Corp, they're in the energy sector.
As you might have guessed.
Yeah, as you might have guessed from the name, specifically the uranium industry.
Okay.
They do everything from exploration, extraction, and processing of uranium.
Wow, the whole 9 yards.
Pretty much, yeah. And they also handle some titanium concentrates.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they've got a pretty broad reach. Their operations are all over the U.S.
Give us some locations.
Yeah, you're looking at Texas, Arizona, Colorado, Wyoming.
Okay, so big presence in the U.S.
Huge presence in the U.S. and then even beyond that into Canada and Paraguay.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So they're not messing around. They're all over the place.
No, they're a pretty significant player.
Got it.
Just a little bit of background. They were actually originally known as Carlin Gold Inc.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and they changed their name back in 2005 to Uranium Energy Corp.
Okay, so that kind of gives you a sense of, the timeline and kind of where they've come from.
Exactly. And if you want to learn more, you can always check out their website too.
Always a good idea.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so now let's get into the meat of it, the stock itself.
Okay.
The report's showing a current price hovering around $5.51
right.
USD.
Yeah.
And then just looking at some more recent numbers, the last close was $5.08.
Oh.
And we saw a little dip, a tiny dip of 1 cent.
Okay.
On the day this report was put together.
Right.
And it's interesting, if you look back over the past year,
yeah,
it's been quite a ride. They've gone from a low of $4.06 all the way up to $9.06.
Big swings.
Yeah, some big volatility there.
Yeah.
We're also looking at a market cap of $2.15 billion.
Okay.
And an enterprise value of $2.09 billion.
All right.
So, I mean, what should we be paying attention to with all these numbers? What stands out to you?
Yeah, well, I think what's really interesting here is when you start to look at the valuation.
Okay.
The report mentions a fair value of $9.06.
Which is quite a bit higher than where it is right now.
It is, yeah, considerably higher. And even, our own internal price target.
Based on this data?
Based on this data is $6.27.
Okay.
So still, a decent amount of upside potentially.
Right.
And then if you look at the analysts, they're even more bullish. Yeah, their average price target over the last 6 months has been $9.88.
Wow. Okay, so that's a pretty big range there.
It is, yeah. And I think for you listening, what this really highlights is that there's a difference of opinion on what UEC is actually worth right now.
Okay,
yeah.
So it's not a slam dunk either way.
Exactly.
There's a lot of uncertainty, but it's certainly something to keep in mind as we go through the rest of this information.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that gap between the current price and the potential value, that's definitely interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, one thing that we always talk about when we're looking at a company's long-term prospects is the idea of an economic moat.
Right.
Does UEC have one of those? Is there something protecting their business?
This is a really key point because according to this report, UEC doesn't have what we would consider a traditional economic moat.
Okay, so explain what that means for our listeners who, maybe aren't familiar with that term.
Yeah. So essentially it means they don't have deeply entrenched competitive advantages.
Got it.
They're operating in the uranium market, which is a commodity business.
Right.
So the price of uranium is really the big driver.
It's all about supply and demand.
Exactly. It's all about supply and demand. And that's influenced by all sorts of things that are outside of UEC's control, global events, political events, energy policies.
Yeah.
They don't have like a unique cost advantage.
Okay.
Or some proprietary technology that nobody else can replicate.
Right.
Or a super strong brand the way you might see with like a consumer company.
Gotcha.
So their success is really tied to those external factors.
Okay, so no real moat to kind of shield them from the ups and downs of the uranium market,
right,
which, as we've seen, can be pretty volatile.
It can be, yeah.
Right, so that kind of sets the stage for, understanding the risks involved.
For sure.
let's move on to what the analysts are saying. The people who follow this company closely, they're always putting out these ratings and price targets, and it looks like there's been some activity there.
Yeah.
So what's the overall picture? What are they
Yeah.
saying?
Well, keeping an eye on analysts is always a good idea because it gives you a sense of, what the professionals are thinking.
Right, what the sentiment is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we saw Roth Capital, they raised their price target to $9.50 back in September 2024.
Okay.
That was up from $9 previously.
So a little bump.
A little bump, yeah. And then around the same time, H.C. Wainwright, they reiterated a buy rating with a $10.25 target.
Okay, so those are both pretty positive.
Those are both pretty positive. And then even earlier, back in October 2023, an analyst from Roth Capital was actually quite bullish on UEC with a $6.75 target. And that was based on, the expectation of rising uranium prices.
Right.
But it's not all sunshine and roses. Back in April 2022, Canaccord Genuity actually downgraded UEC to a hold.
Interesting.
Yeah, with a $5.50 target, and they cited valuation concerns at the time.
Okay, so it sounds like a bit of a mixed bag.
It is, yeah. And I think, for you, what this shows is that there's a range of opinions out there.
Right.
And that makes sense because we're talking about a company in a cyclical commodity market.
Mm-hmm.
It's inherently uncertain, so it's natural that there are going to be different views.
Yeah, you can't predict the future.
Exactly.
But those recent positive revisions, that's definitely an encouraging sign.
It is, yeah. But, we always have to remember that these views can change just as quickly as they went up.
Right. Things can turn on a dime.
Exactly.
All right, so let's shift gears a little bit and dive into the hard numbers, the financial performance of UEC.
Okay.
This report gives us a really good look at their revenue, their earnings, their cash flow over time.
Yeah.
So what are the key trends that we should be aware of? What stands out to you?
Well, I think the first thing that jumps out at me is just how much variability there is.
Okay.
For example, their revenue saw an absolutely massive surge
Oh,
of over 600%
wow.
between fiscal years 2021 and 2022.
Okay.
But then you also see periods where they're reporting net losses.
So some big swings there.
Yeah, some really big swings. And projections suggest that revenue will continue to grow out to fiscal year 2029.
Okay.
But those are just estimates,
It's anyone's guess.
It is, yeah. And their earnings per share have also fluctuated quite a bit.
Okay.
If you look at cash flow, both their operating cash flow and free cash flow,
Right.
they've gone back and forth between negative and positive territory.
Gotcha.
Their balance sheet shows, changes in debt levels, cash levels.
Great.
Their profitability margins have also been pretty inconsistent.
So what's the takeaway from all this for our listeners?
I think, the big picture is that this financial volatility
Yeah.
really underscores the fact that they're tied to the fluctuating uranium price.
Right.
And they don't have that strong moat to kind of buffer them from those swings.
Right.
So, there's projected growth, but the historical data really shows that their performance can be pretty sensitive to market conditions.
So buckle up.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so some impressive growth spurts, but also some significant volatility in their financials.
Yeah.
Now let's move on to what's been happening within the company lately.
Okay.
Are there any, important news or developments that we should know about?
Yeah, and this is where things start to get really interesting, I think, because there are some potential near-term catalysts.
Okay.
So the report highlights a couple of press releases from March and February of 2025.
Uh-huh.
They announced that they've hit some uranium concentrate production milestones
Okay.
at their Irigaray plant and Christensen Ranch.
All right, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, it shows that they're making progress operationally. Back in January 2025, they increased their stake in Anfield Energy.
Interesting.
Yeah, which suggests that they're making strategic investments.
Okay.
And then in December 2024, they made a pretty significant acquisition.
Ooh.
They acquired Rio Tinto's Sweetwater plant and their Wyoming uranium assets.
Wow, so they're really expanding their footprint.
Exactly. Yeah, they're expanding their resource base.
Wow.
And then in January, they also participated in a Goldman Sachs conference,
Okay.
which indicates that, they're actively engaging with the investment community.
So they're getting out there, they're letting people know.
Yeah, exactly. They're trying to drum up some excitement.
Got it.
So all of these recent actions suggest that they're really working to increase production and expand their assets.
So it sounds like they're making some moves.
They are. Yeah.
Now, it's not just about what's happening within the company.
Right.
The report also mentions some broader industry news
It does.
that could affect UEC. So let's talk about that.
Okay, so zooming out a little bit, there are some external factors that could have a pretty big impact on UEC.
Okay. Like what?
So there was some news in November 2024 that Russia might be limiting uranium supply to the U.S.,
Oh, well.
which could be a really big deal.
Yeah.
Because if that happens, it could boost demand and prices for domestic producers like UEC.
Right.
So that's something to watch.
Yeah.
There's also this idea that nuclear power could become a really important energy source for the AI boom.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, that was mentioned back in October 2024.
Okay.
And, if that happens, it could create this whole new long-term demand driver for uranium.
Wow. So that would be huge for UEC.
It would be, yeah. And then you have some U.S. government initiatives that are clearly positive for the domestic uranium market.
Okay.
Back in May 2024, there were plans announced to buy domestic nuclear fuel
Okay.
and a ban on Russian uranium imports.
Right.
So you can see how those policies would really benefit companies like UEC.
Absolutely.
And then there was even an analyst note suggesting that UEC could actually outperform Cameco,
Which is a big player.
which is, one of the biggest players in the space.
Wow. So a lot of potential tailwinds. There.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that could really push UEC forward.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So geopolitical shifts, government policies,
Mm-hmm.
these are all things that are outside of UEC's control.
Yeah,
But they could really work in their favor.
exactly. Yeah, it's all about the broader environment.
All right. So let's talk about the people leading the company.
Okay.
Who are the key players?
So the report names Amir Adnani as the CEO
Okay.
and Josephine Mann as the CFO.
Got it.
It's always good to know who's at the helm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there was also a mention of some insider trading activity.
There was.
What should we make of that?
Yeah, so the CFO, Josephine Mann, she had several transactions in October 2024.
Okay.
She both bought and sold shares on the same day
Interesting.
at different prices.
So what does that tell us?
Well, it's important to remember that we can't really interpret insider trading definitively.
Right.
There could be all sorts of personal financial reasons for those actions.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that she thinks the stock is going up or down.
Exactly.
Right.
It's just something to be aware of. It's another piece of information to consider.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so just a final quick look at, where UEC's revenue is actually coming from.
Okay.
What are the main sources?
So the revenue is primarily coming from two things, the sale of inventory
Yeah.
and toll processing services.
Gotcha.
And geographically, the vast majority of their revenue is generated in the United States,
Okay.
which, makes sense given their focus on domestic operations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
I think so, yeah.
Let's wrap up our deep dive into Uranium Energy Corp.
Okay, that's good.
Based on this report, what are the key takeaways for our listeners?
All right, so to summarize, UEC is a U.S.-based uranium company
Okay.
with some significant assets.
Yeah.
And they seem to be pretty strategically positioned to benefit from this growing global interest in nuclear power.
Okay.
And they've got some favorable government policies and geopolitical shifts affecting uranium supply that could really help them out.
Right.
They've also shown some recent progress in their operations.
Yeah. They're not just sitting still.
No, they're definitely making moves.
Expanding their footprint.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's super important to remember that they're operating in a really volatile market.
That uranium market. Yeah.
Yeah, and they don't have that strong economic moat.
Right.
So they're susceptible to price fluctuations and competition.
So there's risk.
There's definitely risk, yeah.
All right. So it's a balancing act.
It is.
Potential rewards, but also potential risks.
Right.
So
Yeah.
just to reiterate, this has been our focused look at UEC based on the report that you guys sent us.
Right.
And as always, this is not investment advice.
Right.
We'd encourage you to do your own research before you make any decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But to kind of leave you with something to think about,
Okay.
I'm curious what you think given all this information.
Yeah.
We've got the potential upside from this increased nuclear energy demand,
Right.
but we've also got the inherent risks of the uranium market.
Yeah.
So how do you assess that risk-reward balance for a company like Uranium Energy Corp?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
And for all of you listening, if you found this analysis valuable,
Yeah.
please support our work.
Absolutely.
Subscribe to the channel,
Hit that bell icon.
hit that bell icon so you don't miss any future deep dives like this.
Yeah, we'd really appreciate it.
And your support really helps us bring you more of these focus breakdowns.
For sure.
So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone.
And we'll see you next time.
See ya.